The story of Fanta begins not in a boardroom, but in the midst of global conflict. It was World War II, a time of immense hardship and disruption. In Germany, the Coca-Cola company had a thriving business led by a dedicated man named Max Keith. He was in charge of Coca-Cola GmbH, the German bottling operation. However, as the war intensified, international trade routes were severed. A strict trade embargo was placed on Nazi Germany, making it impossible for the essential Coca-Cola syrup to be imported from the United States. This presented Keith with a monumental challenge that threatened the very existence of his company and the jobs of his many employees. Facing the prospect of shutting down his bottling plants entirely, Max Keith knew he had to act decisively. He could not simply wait for the war to end. The machinery would rust, the workers would be without income, and the company he had built would crumble into nothing. Keith was a loyal German citizen, but also a dedicated Coca-Cola man. He felt a deep responsibility to keep the business running. His only option was to create a completely new beverage, a product that could be made using only the ingredients available within Germany's blockaded borders. This was not a simple task. It required creativity, resourcefulness, and a willingness to improvise under extreme pressure. The challenge was immense. Coca-Cola had a secret, globally recognized formula. Keith had no such recipe to work with. He had to start from scratch, looking at the German food industry's byproducts and leftovers as potential ingredients. The goal was to create something palatable, something that could be bottled using the existing Coca-Cola infrastructure. This decision was a gamble born out of sheer necessity. It was a bold move to invent a new soda in a time when basic food supplies were rationed. Yet it was this very scarcity that forced the innovation that would eventually lead to one of the world's most famous drink brands. Max Keith's determination set the stage for one of the most unusual origin stories in corporate history. He was not trying to launch a new global brand, he was simply trying to survive. He gathered his team of chemists and technicians and gave them a clear mission: create a marketable soft drink using whatever they could find. The fate of Coca-Cola GmbH rested on their ability to turn the limited resources of a war-torn nation into a refreshing beverage that the public would actually want to drink. This desperate need for a Coca-Cola substitute was the unlikely catalyst for the birth of Fanta. Inventing a new drink required an incredible amount of ingenuity, especially given the severe limitations on available ingredients. Max Keith and his team had to be creative, scouring the German landscape for anything that could be fermented, sweetened, and carbonated. They turned to the leftovers of other industries, finding potential in materials that were often discarded. One of the primary components they sourced was whey, the watery liquid left over after milk has been curdled and strained during the cheese-making process. Whey provided a liquid base and a small amount of sugar, forming the foundation of this new concoction. It was an unconventional choice, but in wartime Germany, nothing could be wasted. Another key ingredient came from the fruit pressing industry. After apples were pressed to make cider, the remaining pulp, known as pomace or apple fiber, was usually thrown away or used as animal feed. Keith's team saw this as a valuable resource. They used the apple fiber to add flavor and body to their developing beverage. The resulting taste was certainly unique. The first version of Fanta was not the sweet, orange-flavored drink we know today. It had a vague fruity flavor, often described as being yellowish in color and tasting faintly of apple. The exact formula changed constantly based on what ingredients were available at any given time. Sweetness was another major hurdle. With sugar heavily rationed, they had to find alternative sweeteners. They eventually secured a supply of saccharin, an artificial sweetener that had been discovered decades earlier. This allowed them to make the drink palatable without using up precious sugar reserves. They also experimented with beet sugar, which was more readily available in Germany than cane sugar. The combination of whey, apple fiber, and various sweeteners was a far cry from the crisp taste of Coca-Cola, but it was a carbonated, sweetened beverage that could be produced and sold, which was the ultimate goal. The result was a product of its time and place, a testament to making the most out of very little. The final liquid was often described as a pale, straw-colored drink. Its flavor profile was inconsistent, changing from batch to batch depending on the specific scraps that were available. Sometimes it might have had hints of other fruits if different pomaces were used. Despite its humble and variable nature, it was a success. It was a sweet, fizzy drink available to a public that had few other luxuries. The resourcefulness of Keith's team had paid off, turning industrial byproducts into a popular consumer product. Once the new drink was formulated, it needed a name. Max Keith understood the power of branding, even in the difficult circumstances of the war. He gathered his team and urged them to use their imagination. He reportedly told them to let their Fantasie, the German word for imagination or fantasy, run wild. A veteran salesman on the team, Joe Nip, immediately heard the word fantasy and exclaimed, "Fanta!" The name was perfect. It was short, catchy, and easy to pronounce, and it captured the spirit of creativity and imagination that had gone into the drink's creation. The name stuck instantly, and Fanta was officially born. Fanta quickly grew in popularity throughout Germany. It wasn't just a beverage, it became a versatile household staple. With sugar being so scarce, many German families, particularly housewives, bought Fanta not just for drinking, but also for cooking. They used the sweet, fruity liquid as a sugar substitute to sweeten soups, stews, and desserts. This unintended use case dramatically increased its sales and embedded Fanta into the fabric of German domestic life during the war. It became a practical solution to a common problem, solidifying its place in the market beyond just being a simple refreshment. It was a symbol of making do. The success was significant. By 1943, sales of Fanta had reached nearly 3 million cases. Max Keith had not only saved the company and its employees, but had also created a surprisingly profitable product. The Fanta brand kept the bottling plants operational and the Coca-Cola GmbH name alive in the minds of German consumers, even without the flagship product. Keith's leadership during this period was remarkable. He managed to navigate the treacherous political landscape of Nazi Germany, while keeping his operations independent and focused on business survival. Fanta's success was a direct result of his unwavering dedication and business acumen. However, the story of Fanta during this era is tied to its context. It was a product born in and for Nazi Germany. While Max Keith himself was not a member of the Nazi Party and managed to resist pressure to join, his company operated within that regime. He was later investigated by Coca-Cola headquarters after the war, but was ultimately exonerated, credited with preserving the company's assets under incredibly difficult circumstances. The Fanta brand he created became a wartime sensation in Germany, a sweet taste of normalcy in a world that was anything but. When World War II ended in 1945, the story of the original Fanta came to an abrupt halt. With the fall of the Nazi regime and the restoration of international trade, the main Coca-Cola company from Atlanta re-established contact with its German branch. The flow of Coca-Cola syrup resumed, and the original world-famous soda was once again available to the German people. There was no longer a need for the substitute drink that had been born out of necessity. Production of the whey and apple fiber Fanta ceased, and the brand essentially disappeared from the market, seemingly destined to become a forgotten footnote in history. For about a decade, Fanta remained dormant. However, the Coca-Cola company was facing a new challenge in the 1950s. Its main rival, Pepsi, was beginning to diversify its product line by introducing new drinks and flavors. Coca-Cola executives realized that relying solely on their single iconic product might be a risky long-term strategy. They needed to expand their portfolio to compete effectively. It was during this period of strategic thinking that the idea of reviving the Fanta name emerged. The name was already owned by Coca-Cola thanks to Max Keith's wartime efforts, and it had a proven, if brief, history of success. The revival of Fanta took place in 1955, but this time it was a completely different product. The Coca-Cola bottling plant in Naples, Italy, became the birthplace of the new Fanta. Italy, with its abundant and high-quality citrus fruits, was the perfect place to launch a new orange-flavored soda. Using local oranges, the Italian bottler created what we now know as Fanta Orange. This new formulation was bright, sweet, and bursting with citrus flavor. It was a deliberate, market-driven creation, a stark contrast to the original's makeshift recipe. The iconic ringed bottle, designed by Raymond Loewy in 1955, was also introduced to give the drink a fun and distinctive look. This new Fanta Orange was an immediate hit. Its success in Italy prompted the Coca-Cola company to launch it across Europe and soon the world. Fanta became Coca-Cola's second global brand, its primary offering in the fruit-flavored soda category. The brand expanded rapidly, introduced into the United States in 1960 and then to countries across Africa, Asia and Latin America. Today, Fanta is sold in over 190 countries with a dizzying array of over 100 different flavors tailored to local tastes, from grape and pineapple to elderflower and lychee. From its desperate beginnings in wartime Germany, Fanta has transformed into a global symbol of fun, flavor and variety.